Welcome to the Steel Curtain Podcast. It's Monday, October 6th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers won the bye week with the Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, and Baltimore Ravens all losing on Sunday. But of course, it is the Steelers bye week. No game to talk about with you or deep dive on this Monday show. So we're going to go through a bye week six-pack on this episode. I'm Josh Yourish with you on a Monday on the Steel Curtain Podcast. And I have 6 questions that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to share my answer about the franchise this season, going forward at large, as we kind of can zoom out. We have an opportunity to zoom out a little bit. So that's what I wanted to do with this show. On Wednesday, Tommy and Shane will get you ready for the Steelers to return to the field in week 6 at home against the Cleveland Browns, with a chance to inflict some further damage in the AFC North that seems to be falling apart. So that's where we go for our first question of this 6-pack. Are the Steelers the AFC North favorite? Should the Steelers be the AFC North favorite? Those are, I guess, 2 different questions. One can be answered by the betting odds, another by just, analysis and not such a hard and fast answer. The betting answer right now is no. The Ravens are minus 105 at the FanDuel Sportsbook right now. That's to win the AFC North. The Steelers are plus 130, the Bengals plus 1100, and the Browns 17-1. So the Bengals and Browns have all but fallen away. The Joe Burrow injury accomplished that for the Bengals, and everything about the Browns over the last, 20 or so odd years did it for the Browns. The Ravens are now 1-5 or one. Yes. They are heading into, they are 1-4. My apologies. Jump the gun. My point, the Ravens are heading into a matchup against the Rams next week before their bye. So have a very good chance to be 1-5 heading into their bye. And if the Steelers can take care of business against the Browns, it would be a fairly significant advantage in the AFC North, one that would not be easy for the Ravens to overcome. If the Steelers can get to 4-1 and have the Ravens drop to 1-5, and there's even a chance with the Steelers coming out of the bye week with the Browns and then the Bengals for the Steelers to get to 5-1 and be up 4 games in the loss column on the Ravens at that point. And yet I still tend to side with the sports books right now. It might be just the absolute year from hell for the Ravens, right? With all the injuries that they have, that it's a mash unit. The 49ers continue to be like one of the most injured teams in the NFL, and the Ravens have blown them out of the water. Lamar Jackson did not play in week 5 as the Ravens fell to 1-4 with a 44-10 loss to Houston. And that's not a particularly great Houston team, but the weaknesses that Houston have along the offensive line and defensively, they don't really have any weaknesses, but running the ball along the offensive line, the Ravens are not equipped to exploit necessarily when they're at full health, because they don't have a particularly imposing pass rush. I mean, Kyle Van Noy at this point in his career, if he's your top pass rusher, you're not in a very good spot. But with all the injuries, the defense for Baltimore is in even more of a disastrous spot. Last year, Baltimore was struggling. They had one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They played a really tough schedule. And that's part of this as well, because Baltimore has, the Buffalo loss. They have a Kansas City loss, this Houston loss without Lamar Jackson, lost to Detroit. Those are some of the best teams in the NFL. Those are Super Bowl contenders. It's not a guarantee that just because they lost those games, they're going to lose in division, right? Because there's a good chance there are 4 wins sitting out there right now with the Bengals and the Browns, and that gets you back over 500, compared to the losses that they already have. Coming out of the bye week, they have the Bears, and that's not the toughest matchup ever. That's not as easy as it has been in the past, but it's certainly not the toughest matchup ever. I think you get Lamar Jackson healthy. He's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm just going to favor that team against the Steelers team that has a lot of problems, and I haven't liked the way they've played in 3 out of their 4 games so far this season, and I'm not going to suddenly just throw all my weight behind the Steelers as the favorite, as the pick to win the AFC North, when a lot of it has been schedule dependent for the Steelers start and the Ravens, slow start. Coming out of the bye, obviously, it's the Browns and the Bengals for the Steelers, but then it's Green Bay, it's Indianapolis, which looks like one of the better teams in the AFC. It's at the Chargers, it's at home, Cincinnati again. Then it's at the Bears. Buffalo comes to town, at the Ravens. Miami should be a win on Monday night, December 15th, but then it's Detroit, Cleveland again, and Baltimore. Like, there are really tough games coming up for the Steelers, and the Ravens have already played a lot of those games. So it's too early in the season, in my opinion, for me to just back the Steelers to win it all. Grayson Brown brings up a good point in the chat. Since the inception of the divisional realignments in 2022, no team has won the AFC North 3 years in a row. And, that does tend to happen. We see that in the NFC East as well, where it's just a lot of turnover at the top of that division. It's, this between the Steelers, it's ping pong between the Steelers and the Ravens quite a bit over that stretch, with few exceptions of the Bengals and even the Browns being competitive from time to time. I just think there's such a difference in class between the Ravens when they're healthy and the quarterback position in particular, that it's too early for me to say the Steelers should be the favorites. I think the Steelers have a way better shot than I would have ever imagined at this point in the season, and I think it's absolutely possible that the Steelers can win the AFC North. I think the Steelers should feel like they have to win the AFC North with the way the Ravens have started. I think that should be where Aaron Rodgers and Mike Tomlin and the rest of that locker room is at. They should feel like they have to, because they've caught the break of all breaks with Baltimore struggling as much as they have. You have to take advantage of that. But I'm not going to say they're going to do it just yet. And talking about that division that Grayson Brown mentioned and how it turns over so much and is typically one of the most competitive in the NFL, could there be a case that the AFC North is the worst division in the NFL this year? I think you can make the case. I don't think it ultimately is. I think you have a more compelling case that it's the worst division in the AFC. When you look at the bottom, there are only 2 other divisions that have 2 teams as bad as the Browns and the Bengals. Obviously, the Bengals sans Joe Burrow and the disastrous situation that they seem to be in. That's the AFC East with the Dolphins and the Jets, both plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl, and the NFC South with the Panthers and the Saints. The Ravens currently still have the 6th best Super Bowl odds, according to FanDuel. And, odds, I'm not talking about what bets to place. I'm just talking about where the industry is viewing these teams. And some of that is based on preseason numbers that they had. They're not going to move them so drastically just because of the start. Like, they don't want to overexpose themselves. And so it's not a perfect formula, but it is a good way to kind of see, okay, who are the sports books afraid of winning the Super Bowl? The Ravens have the 6th best odds. That may have something to do with how easy the bottom of the division is in the AFC North, but the Steelers are still at the 17th best Super Bowl odds. So those are, the Ravens are considered a contender. The Steelers are not, and the Browns and the Bengals are 2 of the worst teams in the NFL. Ultimately, it probably has to be the NFC South, right? The Bucks have the 13th best Super Bowl odds, and they're the best team in that division. I think I like the value with that. The Bucks, I think they have a better shot of winning the Super Bowl than the 13th best team in the NFL. But the Panthers and Saints, again, are tied at plus 4,000. where the Bengals are, with the farthest odds to win the Super Bowl. The AFC East is interesting in this discussion as well, because that's part of why Tom Brady made the run, and Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I feel like we can mostly kind of just say Tom Brady now, right? Seeing what Bill Belichick is doing at North Carolina. Part of it was the Jets were perennially a dumpster fire. The Dolphins never really figured it out and put things together to be a contender in that division. And the Bills had their issues for so long as well, especially with Brady in that division. Part of that is knowing that there's Brady, and it's just hard to punch up at a monster like that when you have those losses on your schedule every year. But those teams couldn't figure it out at quarterback. And it continues to be a weaker division, right? The Dolphins and the Jets are in pretty awful spots. The Jets are probably the worst team in the NFL, which makes that Steelers week 1 win look even worse. And the Dolphins just lost to the Panthers after jumping out to a huge lead. And they're in such a tough spot because they tried to invest so heavily in that offense and rebuild Tua's confidence with Mike McDaniel. And they kind of did, but it led to a lot of attrition in the trenches. And that's just not a good roster right now. Their secondary is probably the least talented in the NFL. So the Patriots becoming maybe a contender with Drake May and beating the Bills last night does change things a little bit, because I would say, even though the Steelers just beat the Patriots, I would say the Patriots have a better chance of, if you're looking at Super Bowl contenders, of winning the Super Bowl. The sportsbooks would agree they have more favorable odds to win the Super Bowl than the Steelers. Just because the upside you have at the quarterback position. I know that roster is very flawed. The offensive line is taking some steps where the Steelers' offensive line still has its issues. Stephon Diggs looked a lot better against Buffalo. And so you're looking at maybe 2 teams that could really contend to win playoff games. I still don't think the Steelers are a playoff game winner. Depending on the matchup, maybe you get lucky, but a legitimate, I'll say, conference championship threat. I don't see there's any chance that the Steelers win 2 playoff games with this roster, with this quarterback, everything. I could squint and see it a little bit more with just, okay, Drake May gets really hot. You have some talent on that roster and a couple veterans that you brought in. I really like Mike Vrabel as a coach. So I think there's an argument the AFC North is the worst division in the AFC, worst in the conference. And that's probably going to make the Steelers look like if they do ultimately dethrone the Ravens for the division crown, not going to look like such a threat in the postseason. So I feel like you can get so caught up in that race, right, to win the AFC North, and obviously hope that the Steelers are able to do that and take advantage of this slow start from the Ravens. But it's worth setting the context of what are they actually winning, because I think we still view the AFC North as, oh, it's such a gauntlet every year, and it can be. But this year, the better divisions are, the NFC North is looking like a really good division. The AFC West, even the NFC West, is pretty loaded with the Seahawks and Sam Darnold playing as well as he is. Winning the AFC North would not be the accomplishment, especially considering the Joe Burrow injury and now the Lamar Jackson, all the Ravens injuries, would not be the accomplishment that it typically is. But there's still a good chance that, the Steelers are looking at a home playoff game in the first round of the playoffs. It is becoming more and more possible, considering the situation that the Ravens are in. We'll move along to number 3 of this bye-week 6-pack. My just thoughts about the Steelers, where they're at, more big picture stuff, and it's about the head coach. Is Mike Tomlin a top 10 coach? Let's look at it, because I've been very critical of Mike Tomlin. I want to set this up a little bit before we just jump into the answer. I've been very, very critical of Mike Tomlin. I think the Steelers need to move on from Mike Tomlin. I think things have gotten stale. I think you can make the defensive argument of Tomlin that he hasn't had an answer at quarterback, and that has really hamstrung him, and he's been able to win a ton of games despite that. and that's really impressive. But I think there are a lot of things that he does that hold back an organization from taking steps to actually compete with the better teams. I think you see it regularly that his defense gets pounded by good offenses. It tends to get worse as the season goes along. We saw that with the Ravens absolutely trouncing the Steelers in the playoffs last year. And it's such a talented group. He's a defensive minded head coach. He doesn't get more out of it, right? He doesn't trust young players to develop. And I think that hamstrings them early in their career, but also hurts the Steelers from an infusion of talent perspective where, okay, maybe you take your lumps early in the season, but a third rounder, a fourth rounder, a Caleb Johnson is now a contributor by week 10. And that's typically when those guys, those rookies start to actually see the field. Like I think that's problematic. I think how Tomlin shackled Justin Fields prevented them from getting the maximum upside out of that offense. I don't think Justin Fields is a franchise quarterback or was ever going to be one, but I think it shows you the limitations he's going to put on any young quarterback, and Tomlin would not be somebody I would remotely trust to develop a young quarterback. So I think he is still something of a very capable head coach, especially Monday to Saturday. I think you have seen some of the growth that the Steelers defense has made just in terms of like fundamentals and run fits, and that improves a team and gets you to win a certain number of games. He's able to drag some teams down into the mud with him where it comes down to a turnover, and his team often wins those close games. Like that is super valuable. I don't think he makes the plus expected value decisions in terms of game management. He's always been a disaster in terms of timeout usage, challenges, all the game management stuff, fourth downs. We talked about the fourth downs against the Vikings and the awful decision, in my opinion, to punt when you could have won the game by getting a half yard. I think there are a lot of reasons that you can say Tomlin is not a top 10 head coach in the NFL, and certainly not the right head coach for where the Steelers are going as a franchise, where they're going to need a young quarterback at some point. Like maybe he's a better option right now with this aging roster and Aaron Rodgers and managing those personalities and whatnot. I think he was a great head coach for the Ben, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell teams, like for the obviously won a Super Bowl and went back to another before that. But I think in some ways, schematically, the game has started to pass him by. And in other ways, just in terms of game management, aggressiveness, things like that, it certainly has passed him by. And then the development piece, I really worry about what it's going to look like thrusting a young quarterback into his operation as a whole. I took the time to, it's easy to say, okay, no, he's not a top 10 head coach, in my opinion. But I wanted to take the time to look at, okay, who are my top 10 head coaches? And this isn't like the most flushed out list ever that but I feel confident in I would take these guys over Mike Tomlin, certainly. And then there are some I want to talk about just in terms of what makes the head coach. Are we thinking about head coaching value the right way? I think a lot of teams are kind of starting to, with the trend of going towards more play callers, but does that matter? Should it matter even more than we're saying? Number one, I have Sean McVay. Number two, I have Andy Reid. I feel like that's fair. Both Super Bowl winners and great play callers, notably. They're both play callers. Number three, I have Kyle Shanahan. Just seeing what he did the other night with all the injuries, with Mac Jones beating Sean McVay on the other side. He's taken Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo to Super Bowls. Like, okay, he hasn't won it, but it's so hard not to have him even number one. And that's going to be the point I get back to with this head coaching stuff. And then I put Nick Sirianni at number 4, Dan Campbell at number 5, John Harbaugh at number 6. Those are kind of like CEO head coach guys that have had a ton of success and really great rosters and have managed them well. And also really aggressive decision makers. Like the way Nick Sirianni and the Eagles use fourth down to their advantage doesn't just change their decision making on fourth down, changes everything they do on third down. We've heard it a million times. Maximizes their run game. It allows them to take more deep shots with Jalen Hurts, and he's a really good deep ball thrower. That stuff is so important. The game management stuff is so important. Dan Campbell's one of the best at it too. John Harbaugh was one of the guys leading the charge in terms of going forward on fourth down. And another feather in John Harbaugh's cap, which we can, rip him down and maybe lump him in with Tomlin in a lot of cases as, one of these older guys that's kind of still in the mix. He was so willing with Lamar Jackson, and it's always ridiculous when, okay, Lamar Jackson went, 32 in the draft, and 31 other teams passed on him. Also, the Ravens passed on him, so they don't get so much credit. They drafted Hayden Hurst over Lamar Jackson. So, let's chill out on the credit giving to their front office and everything. But anyways, when they did draft him after Hayden Hurst, they were willing to throw everything away offensively and turn the offense over to Greg Roman and let Lamar be Lamar early in his career. Now he's one of the best passers in the NFL by QBR. He is, I think, the best passer in NFL history, or by passer rating now for a career. But the willingness he had to turn everything over into, he's not going to be a pocket passer. We're going to use his legs to our advantage. We're going to let him create outside of structure. We're going to put him in these advantageous situations and use the 11-man run game to our advantage. That's how you develop a quarterback. Let them do what they do well early in their career. And we even saw with Justin Fields last year, it was, do not turn the ball over. Do not throw the ball over the middle of the field. Fields doesn't like to do that. Do not run the ball very often at all. He uses some in the red zone from time to time, but you can get a pretty efficient offense out of just using the quarterback run game, taking some deep shots, and being willing to maximize things like that. And I'm so sure Tomlin's not going to be willing to do that, and would not have been willing to do that with Lamar Jackson, even a guy like that, and how talented he is. At number 7, after that grouping of kind of those CEO guys, Matt LaFleur, 8, Kevin O'Connell, 9, Sean Payton. Again, play callers, quarterback guys that can really develop the position. And then I'll go Jim Harbaugh at 10, Mike Vrabel at 11. You can interchangeable with those guys. Again, it's not so much the order of that list, but I would definitely take all those guys over Mike Tomlin. Kevin Stefanski, you could even talk me into taking him over Mike Tomlin just in terms of what he does offensively and schematically. I think that's super valuable. Dan Quinn with Washington, I think there are issues with what he does defensively, but he's evolved way more than Tomlin has in terms of what he does schematically on that side of the ball. And his fourth down decision-making is uber aggressive. He's allowed Jane Daniels to flourish in, an offense that trusts that young quarterback more than any other rookie last year in that loaded draft class. Even Todd Bowles, right? Somebody who's been fairly maligned as a head coach. I think he does more interesting stuff defensively than Tomlin in terms of his blitzing and the different looks he creates. They develop their talent really well there, better than the Steelers. And he's adapting to clock management stuff and more analytical decision making, and that we haven't seen Tomlin do. So I think there are better situations where Tomlin would thrive more. I have him somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, around 15, not to 20 because he's not quite 19, 20, but close to 15 range. But what I wanted, the point I wanted to further get to was these head coaches who are play callers, because 6 of my top 10 are offensive play callers. Kyle Shanahan just took Mac Jones, who we saw be very unimpressive in New England and Jacksonville in his career. After what he did with Jimmy Garoppolo, who we know to be a super limited player, and has been a backup everywhere else in his career. After what he's done with Brock Purdy, he gets Mac Jones, who he supposedly wanted when they traded up and took Trey Lance, and turned him into a quarterback that could beat the Rams, a really good Rams defense, and be super efficient doing it. Right. And it's this offensive stuff. The way he puts his quarterbacks in a position to succeed, they're always going to be efficient. You're always going to have an efficient passing game no matter what, no matter who's the quarterback for Kyle Shanahan, you're going to be efficient on that side of the ball. Same with Sean McVay. In a lot of ways, same with Matt LaFleur. The stuff he did when Malik Willis came in for Jordan Love, getting like super creative in the run game and even creating explosives in the passing game with Malik Willis, that is so incredibly valuable that even with McVay, he's not an aggressive fourth down guy. He's not a great clock management guy. He has a lot of the Tomlin issues there, but what he can do with an offense, reinventing it, he's reinventing it once again this year, having Stafford go under center more and like do a lot more of the Jared Goff stuff. And they're getting super high production out of it with their now awesome receiver tandem. Those guys, I would take them over a guy like Tomlin any day. And honestly, if you're making me start a franchise, I would have a hard time not taking a chance on Liam Cohn, not taking a chance on Ben Johnson, not taking a chance on those other, probably not Dave Canales, but you get the point. Like there's some line to it. But if you're creating, like, obviously I would take Kevin O'Connell. He turned Sam Darnold into a player that won, 14 games? I think that's so incredibly valuable, what they can do with quarterbacks, those types of play callers, and how important it is to have a quarterback that is one of the best in the NFL. It would be hard to justify not hiring some type of offensive play caller guy when the cycle comes up. And obviously, this is not breaking new ground because those are typically always the guys that do get hired. But maybe we're even undervaluing them relative to the other coaches in the NFL. And maybe I should have more. Like Sean Payton is a good example, a good comparison with Tomlin. He's won one Super Bowl, right? Did it with a great quarterback that, kind of helped lead him there, then kind of struggled after that. Not struggled, but, middled along. Then Peyton retired, came back with the Broncos. And now he has Bo Nix, who, in my opinion, is a super limited quarterback. I had Spencer Rattler over Bo Nix in that draft class, and that still has a chance. Just keep your eyes out for what Rattler's doing. He's a better downfield thrower than Bo Nix, in my opinion, especially over the middle of the field and like deep intermediate areas. But the way he's been able to maximize what Nix does well, being super accurate underneath in the screen game and actually a pretty good deep ball thrower, especially to the perimeter, he made a rookie into a super efficient quarterback immediately. There's no chance Mike Tomlin can do that. And you just have to, cross your fingers and hope Arthur Smith can. I would absolutely take Sean Payton for that reason alone. And there are a lot of other head coaches I would take over him too. So I just wanted to add some context to that because I do tend to rip on Tomlin. I think, and as Grayson Brown mentions in the chat, and I appreciate the, coming in the comments coming in the chat, all the coaches you mentioned have a young QB. I think that is the main plague of the Steelers, not enough youthful talent at the quarterback position. And yes, like that's an argument you can absolutely make for Tomlin, but he took a swing at a guy, right? Like you could make that argument more credibly to me before he identified Kenny Pickett as a quarterback he wanted to draft, and then he thrust him into a terrible situation, not just in terms of what that offense looked like, the play caller that he had for him, But the moment he put him first on the field in the second half against the Jets with no preparation after Mitch Trubisky looked terrible in the first half, you just throw him out there. That's horrible management of a young quarterback. That guy is the most important asset in the franchise. And Kenny Pickett was the wrong guy. But again, Mike Tomlin's pick. I think you can make that argument much more credibly to me before that experiment. Now that it's happened, I have no faith that he's going to get it right the next time around. And I think you can start to criticize him for, oh, he hasn't had a quarterback. Well, he tried to. He identified the guy. He had the pick. They didn't have to draft a quarterback in that draft. There was not a good quarterback in that draft. Wait till the next one. Trade up in the one before. Like, there are other options. And he didn't capitalize on that opportunity. So, spinning it forward to drafts, to this team, to young players developing under Mike Tomlin. The next question in our 6-pack: how good is the Steelers' 2025 draft class? I think it's important to look at how the talent acquisition process is going, especially we're a couple of years into a new GM. This is Omar Khan's 3rd draft class. What does it look like early? And it's too early to make a call on all of these guys. It'll be too early probably at any point this season. But, okay, let's step back. 4 games in. What do we got? I think Derek Harmon, he played 2 games, but he looks like a budding star. Like, his get off, the way he's able to penetrate, he wins one-on-ones on the interior. So you got to decide, are you going to double him? Are you going to double Cam? Like, he's going to create all kinds of problems. I really like how stout he is in the run game. I just like him. I liked him pre-draft. A lot of people did. So that's not a unique opinion. But he's already an impactful starter. And I think there's just a ton more potential for Derek Harmon. So in my opinion, that's a hit. Caleb Johnson needs to play. We won't know if he doesn't. And yes, he made a terrible mistake against the Seahawks. You still spent 3rd-round draft capital on the guy. Let's give him some carries. Like, he started to get a couple with Jaylen Warren out against the Vikings, and Kenneth Gainwell was amazing in that game. I still think you should have given Caleb Johnson 10 carries. You got to see. You got to see and get answers on those guys, especially early in the year when you feel like you have a softer part of the schedule. I'd love to see, coming out of the bye, Johnson get more involved in the run game, but Jaylen Warren will be healthy, and Kenneth Gainwell is coming off the best game of his career. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think that's kind of, in some ways, malpractice. Like, you invested a lot in this young running back, and you could argue they are seeing what he has in practice, and Aaron Rodgers doesn't like what he has done in terms of pass protection. So you can't get him on the field when the quarterback's going to change the play so often at the line of scrimmage. So you need to be a good blocker and a pass catcher and everything. Okay, yes, I'll hear that. But we got to start getting some return, or seeing if there will be some return on that investment, because it's a pretty significant one at a position that teams don't tend to invest heavily in anymore. Jack Sawyer looks like a serviceable rotational edge piece, and that's what you drafted him to be. I like that pick because it wasn't need-based. It was probably best player available, and you just take a swing on it and hope he adds value. And he is, because Highsmith's already out. Like, you're deep at edge. I think Sawyer could play a few more snaps because Watt and Highsmith and Herbig rather have been taking a ton of them early on. And I like keeping edge players fresh, but also not really going to talk me into taking Herbig off the field, because he's an absolute superstar in my opinion. So I'm fine with that pick. Like, that feels like a hit for the 4th round. And there were questions about it with his lack of athleticism and bend, and he's just kind of a bigger, stiffer edge. Would that really fit? He's, has a pretty good pass rush win rate. I think he's over 14. He's around like 14%. Somewhere 12 to 14% range, which is really good in limited work. So absolutely looking like a hit. Y.A. Black is not the superstar we thought maybe that the Steelers were going to luck into in the preseason. I don't know that that player is in there, but again, like a good rotational defensive line piece. Hit. I think you can say pretty definitively on a couple of those already. Like yes, it's too early to say, but you're looking like you hit. Then it's a crapshoot in the late rounds. Carson Bruner, defensive, special teams guy, 1 defensive snap this year. Will Howard, I didn't like that pick at all. I think he's a backup at best. I don't even think you'd feel good about putting him out there as your number 2 quarterback at any point in his career. I don't think the tools are there. I don't think the accuracy is there. He won a national championship. That team was loaded. A lot of quarterbacks could have. And then Dante Ken is a practice squad guy. Like, this is not an alarming thing, but a trend. Continues to kind of struggle in the late rounds. Logan Lee, Ryan Watts last year, Corey Trice, Spencer Anderson the year before. Spencer Anderson, now he's a swing tackle, and he might be better than Broderick Jones, and that's a whole nother problem in and of itself. But just something to monitor, like those late round picks. You can extract some value every once in a while. The great GMs do. The great drafting teams tend to. So you need, for a team that's very veteran and needs an infusion of youth, you got a good bit of it. And next year, when the Steelers are going to have a lot of mid to late round picks, potentially 12 picks in the draft, depending on comp pick formulas and everything, maybe some more trades and whatnot could raise that number or lower that number. It could ultimately be lower if they trade up for a quarterback. But mixed results late. All GMs are going to kind of have mixed results late. I just want to see more from this draft class, Caleb Johnson especially, and we tend to, as rookie classes season goes on, under Mike Tomlin, for better or for worse, he tends to play those players more and have them kind of a longer onboarding process. So maybe we'll get more answers after the bye week. It's still only 4 games into the season. Now on to number 5. But before we do that, if you're a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Pittsburgh Steelers football, if you're a fan of the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube. Drop a like on this episode if you feel so inclined. You can join us live on youtube.com every Monday, Wednesday, and immediate reaction post-game of every Steelers game. And you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. On to number 5. And I thought this was an interesting one, kind of going back into the offseason. Should the Steelers regret trading George Pickens? Let's talk it through. Pickens has 23 catches for 357 yards and 5 touchdowns with the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb is out, and he's become their de facto receiver 1. And in a lot of ways, he's looked like a stud. I think there's more attention being paid to it. He's in a much better offense with a much better quarterback, who Dak Prescott right now is playing honestly like an MVP. Like, that's the caliber of quarterback that he's playing. And when he's healthy, he tends to. Like, Dak is really, really good. But some of the numbers say, like, this isn't quite as impressive. Okay, the touchdowns are there right now. There are still quite a few flaws in Pickens' game, and I don't think the Steelers should regret it at all. I think it was absolutely the right decision. First, we can talk about like the locker room stuff. I think you manage that much better moving on from a player like Pickens, and I just think with Aaron Rodgers coming in, that's not something you needed. With DK Metcalf coming in, that's not something you needed. I also don't think Pickens would be a fit in the Steelers offense. But let's look at even the numbers that say, okay, this start to the year maybe isn't as great as it looks. Just seeing the touchdowns, some of the big plays, and Dak and the Cowboys are kind of humming on offense. George Pickens, with those 23 catches for 357 and 5 touchdowns, has fewer yards per route run, which is one of the best efficiency metrics for wide receivers, than last season when he was at 2.11. He is at 1.8 this year. That's outside the top 30 in the NFL. And I think that's in line with where I view Pickens as a receiver, probably outside the top 30, like clearly a a wide receiver 2, if you want to put it that way. Not one of the ones. And he has the same average depth of target at 13.9 to year over year for that yards per route run number coming down. He's winning more of his contested catches this year. That's really the big difference. He's at 64.3% contested catch win rate, according to PFF, and was at 37% last year. You think of him as that jump ball winner. Yeah, maybe he wasn't getting the best jump ball opportunities with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields last year, but he's winning a lot more of them with Dak Prescott. Some of that is a quarterback stat, like putting it in the right spot to win those jump balls. I would trust Dak a lot more than the guys the Steelers had, but his drop rate is basically the same. It was 12.3 last year. It's 11.5 this year. He's had a drop in each of the last 3 games, and his yards after the catch per reception is down too. So there's a big touchdown number. There's a little more attention with him playing in Dallas and with a really good quarterback, and that changes things. But he's not a better player than he was. Statistically, no. And eye test, I think he looks like the same guy. And that's not to say he's a bad player, because he was not a bad player for the Steelers. He was a player who was super mercurial. He was sometimes lackadaisical in his route running. He has a very limited route tree, not very much inside out versatility. He's going to be an X on the outside that works really well with CeeDee Lamb, who works from the slot. That he's best working from the slot and over the middle of the field, intermediate, short to intermediate, yards after the catch guy. Pickens, he's an outside the numbers, go win a deep ball guy. That fits great. And Dak Prescott is a much better quarterback than he's ever played for. So I think it's a win-win trade. Like, I would not want to be the team paying George Pickens. I don't know that team will be the Cowboys, considering how much money they have tied up into CeeDee Lamb. So I am happy with the 3rd round pick that the Steelers got, and would make that move again, regardless of how Pickens has started in Dallas and how he's looking. And also, I think he's probably a ticking time bomb. Like, he's happy there right now, and why wouldn't you be with the way Dak's playing? But you really want to deal with George Pickens in a contract negotiation? I don't think that'll be the most fun thing. So just relitigating that with some hindsight now, some distance between it. No, I don't think the Steelers should regret that. I think it was a good deal in the moment. I like the value they got for him, getting that day 2 pick. And I think that they're going to be in a better spot to move up for a quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft. So that brings me to my final question in this Steelers bye week 6-pack. One I feel that I am uniquely suited to answer. Who is the top quarterback in the 2026 NFL draft right now? If you didn't know this about me, I'm not just the Still Curtain podcast host on instant reaction shows. And on Mondays, I am also a college sports staff writer for FanSided. And that's where a lot of my attention is paid. I'm watching just about every game on Saturdays, writing a weekly column, covering these quarterbacks. I have opinions about them. And this draft class is weird because we came into the year thinking we knew the guys. People came into the year trying to convince everyone that Arch Manning was the guy. My take about Arch was not that necessarily that he was going to be bad. He has been bad. It was that we haven't seen enough, and there's no chance he was going to come out in the 2026 class. So I didn't even factor him in preseason evaluations or anything like that. Arch is not a part of this discussion. Arch never should have been a part of this discussion, not because of what he is as a player, which that now disqualifies him as well, but just because he was never going to be in this class. There are some other guys that I think are probably going to come back that I actually like. I really like Sam Leavitt at Arizona State. I think his circumstance has changed quite a bit. Last year, he was this really cool, like, negative play mitigator who was super efficient on underneath stuff, and then was able to hit deep shots to Jordan Tyson, their receiver, with a solid run game. Like, he fit so well when they had a better offensive line than they do this year, and they had Cam Scatterboo. So he could lean on that stuff. This year, that circumstance has changed. He's been asked to be more of a playmaker. He's done a lot more, especially with his legs. He's one of the more efficient scramblers in the country. But it's also come with some more mistakes. And that's just kind of what happens when you have more on your shoulders. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back and get another year of experience. I would love to see that from him because I think experience is incredibly valuable for these guys as they make the jump to the NFL, which is going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth when I mention the top quarterbacks, in my opinion, for this class. But Levitt would factor in the middle of this. Maybe I'll bring up where I would put him if I thought he was going to come out. But I don't necessarily think he's going to. All right. My number one quarterback, I'll work number one and then work down. In the 2026 NFL draft, as of right now, is Oregon redshirt sophomore Dante Moore. This is not just he beat my Penn State Nittany Lions and ripped my heart out, though that game was very impressive. This is a former 5-star, so just like laying the ground a little bit. Former 5-star. He started his freshman year at UCLA and did not look good. As a true freshman, he looked like it for Chip Kelly. And then he decided, okay, I'm going to go transfer and I'm going to sit behind Dillon Gabriel at Oregon. It was the best decision he could have made. Will Stein is one of the best offensive play callers in college. And he looks like a different player than he did 2 years ago when he first got action. He's so poised. That's what I like about him the most. His pocket mobility is really impressive. He's always got two hands on the football. He climbs the pocket really well. He can change arm angles to make the throws he need to. Under pressure in the second overtime when he threw his touchdown on the first play of the second overtime against Penn State. Just a nice, drop the arm angle down, was able to stay calm under pressure. I've loved that about him. This Oregon offense is insanely explosive. It came into that Penn State game. They had a bye this week, so that's the last game they played, with about a 15% explosive play rate. A lot of that is Moore's downfield accuracy and even just his accuracy on throws over the middle to create yards after the catch. That stuff's overlooked. It's more than just completion percentage, right? It's, are you hitting the guys in stride to create the yards after the catch? That's not just all on the receivers. Moore does that really well. He plays within the system really well. And then Penn State and Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, who was at Ohio State last year, in the Rose Bowl against Oregon when Ohio State blew out Oregon in the college football playoff. Knowles unveiled this 3-safety defense at Ohio State with Caleb Downs, who is probably the best defensive player at, well, maybe not, but definitely the best defensive back in college football, as in this 3-safety look. And he just played middle safety and he was essentially a deep middle linebacker. And it just destroyed a lot of what Oregon was doing in terms of the short passing game, which set up their deep shots. When Ohio State had played Oregon earlier in the season, they tried to blitz Dillon Gabriel a lot, Knowles did, and it led to deep shots over their head. And Oregon had receivers, Evan Stewart, who's injured this year, and Trayshawn Holden, who could win those against the Ohio State corners. And they just did. They feasted on deep balls. So Knowles plays this 3-safety look and doesn't blitz. He blitzed, I think, 4 times that whole game. Some of that's game script, but it was also the plan. And it made Gabriel have to just try to take the underneath stuff. And yards after a catch were hard to come by because you have 3 safeties, right? You have a lid on everything. He just kept a lid on everything. Oregon didn't get any explosives. They couldn't really move the ball. So he gets his rematch against Oregon, same play caller in Will Stein. This time he's with Penn State. And he plays the 3-safety look again. Now, he doesn't do it with Caleb Downs, but Zakee Wheatley is a really good safety for Penn State. And he puts a lid on everything. He doesn't blitz Dante Moore very much at all. And the explosive play rate for Oregon, which coming into that game was about 15%, dropped to 7%, 6%. So he cut it in half. And Dante Moore was still insanely efficient because he was so accurate underneath, more accurate than Dillon Gabriel was. He was willing. He didn't ever, a young quarterback in that situation, when it's okay, where we've punted a couple times. Like that game was really defensive led and low scoring through the whole first half. A lot of young quarterbacks are just going to say, okay, I'm going to take the shot. Right. And Will Stein's going to give him some opportunities. Right. I in the NFL, Sean McVay and Stafford on that Thursday night game, they talked about Kirk Herbstreit was talking about you can draw up so many deep shots for Stafford, and McVay can have, every series there's a deep shot because he's not going to throw all of them, right? Like you have a veteran quarterback. If it's not there, he's going to take the check down. And Oregon was still drawing up those deep shots, and Moore was just turning them down when they weren't there. Nope. I'm going to get to my third read. I'm going to come back to my check down, and it's going to be accurate. We're going to be ahead of the sticks, and we're going to live to fight another down. That's poise you don't often see from a redshirt sophomore quarterback in really his first year starting. He did as a true freshman some. He was thrust into that bad situation at UCLA. He's grown a lot. I like his arm. He can make all the throws. Like he's not Cam Ward in terms of like arm slot creativity. But he has enough where he can create off structure or even in the pocket if he needs to throw around a defender or whatnot. I've just been so impressed by him. His poise is the number one thing. His movement in the pocket is probably number two. And then his accuracy is number three. And those are all just massive things. He's not taking sacks. He has a good offensive line in front of him, but he doesn't take negative plays. And he doesn't really put the ball in harm's way much at all. I love Dante Moore. I think he's the best quarterback in the country. And therefore, I think he's the top prospect because he's draft eligible. I think he should be the top prospect in the draft. And again, it's not even a guarantee he comes out because experience has proven to be really valuable for guys coming out. Like Jaden Daniels was in college forever. Bo Nix was in college forever. And then Caleb Williams wasn't. He was in college for 3 years. He started all three, but just in college for 3 years and struggled. Some of that is he joined the Bears with Matt Eberflus and a terrible offensive staff. Some of it is you haven't seen as much. But I would absolutely still be willing to take the chance on Dante Moore. At the top of the draft, I think he's a top 10 prospect. Number 2 for me is going to be a bit of a diversion from what is maybe consensus, what people are talking about, because again, he may not come out. Ty Simpson is the second best quarterback in the country from Alabama. And this is a redshirt junior, former 5-star guy, but he made his first career start against Florida State. Alabama lost that game. He didn't play terribly. His offensive line played terribly. He didn't play terribly in that one, but you could tell it was a guy making his first start who just didn't trust it. Like he really wanted to see it open before he was going to trigger. And you can't do that. You can against Louisiana Monroe, who he played in week 2, and Alabama's offense put up 73 points. And he was nearly perfect. The ball didn't touch the ground. He completed every pass in week 2. And I think you saw the difference from week 1 to week 2 was, okay, I have to let it rip. I'm going to anticipate and throw. I cannot let this come open. I got to throw receivers open. And okay, it was ULM. And then he looked great against Wisconsin. And then he had Georgia. And it was, okay, are you going to look like the quarterback you did in week 1 against Florida State, where you're holding on to it too much, you're trying to run too much and create outside of the pocket more? Then he's a decent athlete. Like he can move, but you don't want him doing that as, his go-to to create especially big plays. Or are you going to be the guy we've seen the last 2 weeks where you sit in the pocket, even under pressure, you anticipate, you throw guys open? Because his anticipation is his best skill. And he was the latter. Like he was the dude against Georgia in the first half. They got out to a big lead. Yes, the offense scuffled in the second half and they didn't put any points on the board. That's because they can't run the ball. So there's a lot on Simpson's shoulders at Alabama, and he is up to the challenge every time. They just beat Vanderbilt. He outdueled Diego Pavia, who's a really good college quarterback. Like he's not a prospect. But I love his accuracy. I love the way he attacks the middle of the field. right? Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, they had Michael Penix at Washington 2 years ago, and Penix threw a ton of deep shots, deep overs, deep crossers, just go balls on the outside. But he loved to live outside the numbers. Like, that's where he was comfortable throwing. That's still where he's comfortable throwing in the NFL. Simpson is the complete opposite. Like, he wants to kill you from between the numbers. He is fearless throwing over the middle, and he's a good decision maker. Like, he doesn't put the ball in harm's way either. He doesn't take a lot of sacks. He's mobile enough to get out of a lot of them. I think he's getting a bit more confident than I would love in his athleticism sometimes, as he goes through SEC play. Like, get the ball out, brother. But when he does, he's really good at it. He's really accurate. So he's my number 2 quarterback. Again, it's an experience thing. Like, there's a chance he comes back, but I would still take a swing on him in the first round. Then number 3 is going to be more of a familiar name. I saw it mentioned in the chat. Lim Jahey, I'll shout you out. I think Mendoza from Indiana is the number 1 pick. Honestly, I think Mendoza is really, really good. I think he's a first round pick. He would not be who I would use the number 1 pick on right now. Like, this is all subject to change. We got to see another half of a season in college football and see what team is picking number 1 and whatnot. But Fernando Mendoza is number 3 for me, as was mentioned in the chat. At Indiana, transferred from Cal. The Indiana offense is super efficient. I love the way they do things there. It's RPO heavy, but they're versatile. They're multiple. They're willing to do different stuff. Against Illinois, when Mendoza and Indiana blew out Illinois, he was an RPO dart thrower. Like, he was pull it out, throw over the middle, pull it out, throw over the middle, and was a really good decision maker and was pretty accurate. At Cal last year, there was a really concerning pressure to sack number that was over 25% because he wasn't really seeing it. He was holding on to it too long. Like, sack rate can be an offensive line thing. Pressure rate can be an offensive line thing. But pressure to sack rate is a quarterback thing. It's, are you getting it out? When you feel the heat, what do you try to do? And he just took too many negative plays for my liking. You haven't seen that at Indiana. I think that staff in Indiana develops quarterbacks insanely well. So I think he'll continue to grow. He has the arm you need. Like, there are a lot of people that love him as the number 1 quarterback. I have him number 3. If Moore and Simpson come back, or one of the two, I'd be fine with him as my number 1 QB in the class from what I've seen so far. I think he can do enough under pressure. I don't love his off-schedule stuff nearly as much as some other quarterbacks in the class, but I think he has, again, good pocket movement. Like, he's a good player, and he has the build. He can move, he can scramble some. Like, he's not going to be a statue back there, and that's really valuable as well. So I would take Mendoza in the first round and think I have a pretty good developmental quarterback that's pretty ready to play early, especially if you feed him a heavy diet of RPOs early and then build him into some of the other, like, true under center quarterback stuff. Like, not that every team does much under center, but he can do it. Like, he can do under center true drop back. He can sit in the shotgun and play from spread, or he can go heavy. I think he would do really well in a McVay, Shanahan, even Arthur Smith-esque offense. For the Steelers specifically, like, I think Mendoza would be a really good fit. So I like him a lot as well. And Grayson Brown says Mendoza reminds me of Goff. I definitely see that, where it's, you got to be super accurate over the middle. Pressure maybe is going to affect you some, but if you're willing to stand in there, you're going to have a super efficient offense. Yeah. And I like Goff. Like, I think Goff's a really good quarterback. I think there's more movement with Mendoza, not to say that he would be like, that would make him better than Goff. There's just more movement there and a little more off schedule, but that's also at the college level. Like, you don't know what that's going to translate to in the NFL. And then number 4, this is the one that he's still at number 1 in a lot of places. Lenore Sellers. And I already saw his name pop up in the chat. If he's developed right, will be a superstar too from Lim Jaehee. Maybe he's got the tools. Yes, he absolutely has the tools. I think so. Let's try to square my thoughts on this. I think oftentimes we do tend to over-index on the tools versus the player. And the player tends to win out. We've seen Anthony Richardson. But on the other hand, if you're going to compete with Josh Allen, you're going to compete with Patrick Mahomes, you need an alien of your own. And Sellers is the best chance we've had since Anthony Richardson of having like a true alien guy who could be like the dude and do it as a runner. He's such a good scrambler. He's like 6'3", 240 and is going to run a 4.4. It's going to be absurd. And in the run game, he's awesome. Think of Lim Jaehee. Think of Sellers as Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming. Yes and no. I think Sellers has a really good arm. Obviously Allen had a really good arm. Sellers is a really awesome runner, even better than Allen was as a runner. But there are alarming numbers and tape as well with Sellers in terms of the negative plays that he's taking. His pressure to sack rate, which I mentioned with Mendoza, was really bad last year. It's gotten better for him this year. Sellers' pressure to sack rate this year is up around 30%. So you think about Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen wasn't taking sacks at a super alarming rate because he was so physically gifted. Yes, it was against Wyoming and, not in the SEC. But that is a mental processing thing. And it can also be, I'm just going to hold on to it like it is, but it's a decision-making thing regardless. And I think Sellers holds on to it a ton. And early in his career, while the throwing comes along, you need him to be super efficient in the run game to keep the offense out there, right? To let him develop. Because we saw with Anthony Richardson, and it's been exemplified even more with the transition to Daniel Jones in Indy, he couldn't hit enough of the short completions, the on-schedule stuff, even just the layups, right? Like you think about young quarterbacks, Sean Payton does a great job of it with Bo Nix. He gives him so many layups that if he hits a couple of the shots, a couple of the real NFL throws he's asking him to make, okay, suddenly we're scoring 25 points today, 24, whatever. And Richardson couldn't do that. Richardson couldn't keep the offense functional. So then you didn't get the highs. Sellers, with his pressure to sack rate being so high, he's going to have you behind the sticks so much that you're not going to get the advantage of the 11-man run game and stuff that I love. Like I am a Jalen Hurts defender because he keeps you on schedule ahead of the sticks and buys you so many extra first downs, not just with the tush push, but because he's a really good like north-south scrambler, talking about Hurts now. And he's going to get you a lot of extra first downs because of it. And then his deep ball ability with, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, you just have more opportunities to hit those, right? You get more chances if you get more first downs. If you think about it, first downs is just chances to make an explosive. You get more of those. Anthony Richardson wasn't giving himself enough of those chances. And I don't think Sellers will either, at least early, with that alarming numbers, the pressure to sack rate. I think it can be there as a thrower. I don't love what I see in terms of him like throwing the ball over the middle of the field. I don't really like the receiver group they have at South Carolina though. And you're playing in the SEC. Like there are stuff stacked against him that I could see it working. And if it works, yes, he's going to be one of those aliens. Like he's going to be one of those dudes. But early on, I worry that he's not going to keep the offense functional long enough to develop. Allen, they gave him a really long leash, which is a credit to Buffalo and their development. But also he didn't take enough of those negatives and was able to do enough as a runner to keep things functional. There was also, if you think about it with Allen, massive changes that they made to his mechanics that made him more accurate. And I don't know that, like, maybe that's just a once in a lifetime thing, right? Maybe this is so clunky for him. He was not a big time recruit and he's got all these abilities. Okay, we cleaned up his mechanics because they were so bad. Now he's super accurate. Like, I don't think we can just say, oh, this guy's been now Sellers. He's been with an SEC coaching staff and whatever. He's just going to get so much more accurate like Josh Allen did because Josh Allen did. I don't think that's so translatable. Yeah, and Grayson Brown says Sellers reminds him of Fields. Like, that is the thing. Like, are you getting Josh Allen? Are you getting Justin Fields? And it comes down to, or even, are you getting an Anthony Richardson, who I kind of compared him to a little bit. And I don't know, but I would be scared to take that swing. I think you need to take upside swings like that, philosophically, but so I would still take him in the first round. But I really want him to go to an organization that has its shit together, right? I really want him to go to an organization that is going to let him sit for a little bit, or is going to give him a long leash, is going to play good enough defense that it's not going to be like a problem. And the Colts, like, they didn't do that with Anthony Richardson. He got hurt. He pulled himself out of the game, and then they benched him for Joe Flacco. And okay, yeah, he shouldn't have pulled himself out of the game because he got tired. That was a bad look. But I don't know. You got to give a guy like that a longer leash, or you don't, because Daniel Jones has them looking like a legitimate AFC contender. So, it's difficult. This quarterback evaluation stuff is difficult. But if you're making me place a bet on who's going to be a good NFL quarterback, I would bet on Moore. I would bet on Simpson. I would bet on Mendoza before I would bet on Sellers. If you're making me bet on who is going to be a potential, like, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, then I would have to bet on Sellers. So it's, what are you are you taking the big swing? Do you feel comfortable taking the big swing? I think Dante Moore could be a big swing. Like, I think he is that level of processor, has that level of poise. Like, I don't think you need the biggest arm in the world. Joe Burrow doesn't have it. But I think, we're going to learn a lot more as we see these guys. A couple other names I wanted to mention. John Mateer. I like the twitchiness. I like the arm. I like the explosiveness. He's asked to do a lot for Oklahoma because they can't run the ball. And he takes on that responsibility really well and is like a capable runner for them. He's like their main option in the run game. He bails from the pocket too much. He's not willing to just sit there and read it out. And that scares me. I think it's going to lead to sacks. It's going to lead to Carson Wentz stuff. But he's got a really twitchy arm. If you can get him in structure and to play in structure, which they can't really ask him to do at Oklahoma because they need him to be that playmaker right now. But I like Mateer. I don't love Mateer, but I like Mateer. Carson Beck looks not like the first overall pick that we thought maybe it was going to be going into last season. I think the accuracy is still a question mark there. But he's cleaned up the decision-making. He's playing behind an awesome offensive line. He has really good skill players. And I think he looks more accurate. So I'm intrigued by Beck right now. I want to see him. He's played a lot of big games and he's done well. I just want to see a little bit more, but he looks so much more comfortable than he did last year at Georgia. And that's meaningful. And I think he could re-enter the first round conversation, but I don't know that there's enough there in terms of playmaking or arm to justify it. Like, he needs to be one of those guys that is hyper accurate because you're not getting the other off schedule stuff. And then Garrett Nussmeier, right now I see him as like a day 2, maybe day 3 guy. And coming into the season, I thought he was going to be the number 1 pick. He was my favorite quarterback in this class coming into the year. And he's been playing hurt with an oblique, some kind of core thing, which we saw Quinn Ewers play with last year. And I used it as an excuse for why I kind of liked Quinn Ewers a little bit. I don't know if he'll be anything, but he also, Nussmeier, has a terrible offensive line, like a non-functional offensive line. Like, I'm not talking about like oh, it's pretty bad, it's kind of leaky. No, they cannot run the ball at LSU, and he is under duress constantly. So it is hard to evaluate him. But the thing I wanted to see cleaned up, I think he sees it fairly well. He's aggressive. He plays with a fair amount of poise and has a good enough arm. I don't think it's amazing. Maybe I overrated it in the offseason. Or maybe it doesn't look as good because it's hurt. But the over aggressiveness, poor decision making that has led to a lot of interceptions, especially untimely interceptions, that hasn't gone away. There is still a lot of, oh, how did you not see that safety? Oh, you didn't see that cornerback drop off at all. Those happened too often last year. And I was kind of betting on, okay, those will be gone. Another year as the starter, really veteran guy. And they're not. So that is why he's kind of a fast faller for me. And then one more name to mention, just because I was more in on him before the season than I am right now, Drew Aller. And I know Grayson and Lone J have been very active in the chat with some of their thoughts on the guys. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on Drew Aller right now. This is maybe like his low point because Penn State just lost to UCLA, also lost to Oregon, and Dante Moore. Aller made some nice throws against Oregon. Aller can create when he's under duress. I think he's big enough. I know he's big enough to stand up under pressure, and he's willing to kind of stand in and make throws. I have concerns about, he's just got really long levers. Like he's 6'5", long arms, long legs. So his footwork, he oversteps a lot, and you can see it. That's why he's such a streaky player. And he got hot in the second half against Oregon. Some of it is his willingness to actually throw the ball downfield. Like, are you going to take the shots? Are you going to trust your receiver to win one-on-one? And I don't think he does until he has to. So that's why you see a big comeback against USC last year in the fourth quarter, because he had to. And you see a big comeback in the Big Ten Championship against Oregon in a game they lost. And you see him come to life in the fourth quarter against Oregon 2 weeks ago. Because, okay, now I have to. Some of that I have blamed on the receivers, but they got better receivers in the portal this year. I don't think they're amazing, but they're good enough. They're good enough to do a little bit more against UCLA, and he's still just not taking those shots. But yeah, with the streakiness, and Trevor Lawrence, another really tall quarterback, is a streaky thrower. And I think you see that with footwork being the big thing for those guys. And that gets even tougher when it's a muddy pocket. You got long legs. You want to step into these throws. You need your footwork to be clean. And okay, are you going to be able to be consistently accurate enough? I don't think he will. And I don't think he has the arm's good. Like, it's pretty good. I don't think he has the off platform throws as well. Sometimes you see it, but again, it's streaky. So when his mechanics are good and he lets the athleticism take over, all right, like I see it. But when it's a neutral game script and you want him to be a little aggressive and like, okay, let's take a shot. You have it. You got a one-on-one, throw it. He doesn't. He turns it down. He's always done it. I thought it was just, he's a young player when he was a sophomore, and now he's a senior, and it's the same thing. He just doesn't throw it. There was a incompletion against Oregon. So I'm trying to remember the exact play. He got two linebackers came on a blitz. He knew he was going to be hot. There are two plays now coming to mind, but this one, he knew he was going to be hot. He had two crossers, like just a third down mesh play. And he waited to sidestep this free rusher when he could have just gotten it out and got the first down on one of the crossers. Instead, he sidesteps and he's kind of getting pulled down, and it's an incompletion. Just get it out. And then against UCLA, there's one where he knows he has a blitz coming, identifies it well pre-snap, keeps Nicholas Singleton in for protection, and I watch Penn State really closely, can you tell? Keep Singleton in for protection, but he's going to be blocking a linebacker, like an edge linebacker, and he doesn't get the ball out quickly. You're trusting your running back to hold up. You got to be hot, like show some urgency. And I don't think he does it ever. So I'm pretty out on Aller. If you want some more of my thoughts on Aller, it's not so diving into like the mechanics and the prospect stuff. But I wrote a column recently on victorybellrange.com called I Was Wrong About Drew Aller. And so that kind of gets into some of my thoughts about him and why I was in, and now I'm just out. So I don't see him as a day two, maybe a day two player, maybe, but probably a day three, like take a flyer in the fifth, fourth, and see if you can change that mindset and get the mechanics cleaned up. If you could, maybe there's somebody there. But no, I'm not. Like, I think, could he be Flacco physically? Yes, but not, it doesn't have the mindset to push the ball downfield the way that Flacco did early in his early days. And now Flacco's just like the veteran guy who knows where to go with the ball. So those are some of my thoughts, a lot longer on the quarterback class for 2026. I'll share more as we get closer, but it feels inevitable that the Steelers need to put their chips in and try to draft one of these young guys. So those are my thoughts and my rankings. Again, going through it: Dante Moore, number 1, Ty Simpson, number 2, Fernando Mendoza, number 3, Lenore Sellers, number 4, John Mateer, number 5, and then, mentions of Carson Beck and Garrett Nussmeier and Drew Aller, just what those players kind of are. Sam Levitt, if he comes out, I'd probably put him above Mateer and below Sellers. I had him as number 2 coming into the season. I did not think very highly of Cade Klubnik, so that's a win for your boy, because he is not playing well and he is not a prospect at all. He is not a good quarterback. So just some thoughts. It'll continue to change, and we'll update it as it does. That's going to do it for me on this bye week show. Went way longer than I do when we have a game to talk about. So I guess that's what happens when I get talking about quarterbacks. But I thought that'd be a fun little exercise. I will be back on Sunday after the Steelers hopefully beat the Cleveland Browns and move to 4-1. But either way, whether they lose, win, I'll be here with Mark Powell to break it all down. So make sure you're subscribed to the Still Curtain podcast. A big thank you to everyone with FanSided, getting this up on all the podcast platforms and everything that you do. Until Sunday, as always, have a good one and go Steelers.